This is Kenneth the K-Rock Klein coming to you with episode number 56 of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping. That's right, the podcast where I give out my takes on sports topics and other factors, other things that are happening in the world as we know of right now. And this is a podcast where, again, you can watch on my YouTube channel. I will be uploading this to my YouTube channel, KWCLINE91, and also to Spotify and Podbean. So that's where you can get my podcast of Two Pals on a Pod. Now, folks, I know that I haven't put out a podcast in the last couple of weeks. I apologize for that. But again, I did tell you that I was going to be very busy. We had some softball games here in the tournament that we were hosting at our stadium, so I had to work those. And in fact, we had some really good teams coming in. I mean, we had number one ranked Texas, and we battled them pretty tough. I mean, they obviously won the game 13-7, so it wasn't like a bad loss. But then we ended up playing number 6 Tennessee, and well, we didn't really step up as far as our softball team is concerned. I mean, Tennessee's pitching was just tremendous, and their team, of course, was loaded with some incredible talent. So they ended up winning the game very well. But our first 9 games of the season, our softball team is 6-3. I wish it was 9-3 because I would have probably said 9-0 because I wish we would have been undefeated. But anyway, our softball team is 6-3, and off to a really good start. And our women's basketball team continuing to make some strides. They're in the conference tournament, which they will be playing a couple weeks from now. So that's just what's been going on in around Lamar University. But there have been some things that have happened over the last couple of weeks that I wanted to get into, and I'm going to be talking about some sports topics in just a moment. But first, obviously, we had a unfortunate situation that happened within our family. One of our very dear family friends, who is the wife of the pastor of the church that we used to go to. I mean, we're all kind of separated right now, but we still have a great place in our hearts for the church we grew up with. The wife of the pastor unfortunately passed away unexpectedly, and it was a real tragic shock to all of us, to those who knew her, to her family members, and it was really devastating. I ended up having to go to a memorial service for her, and it was a really tough memorial service because as many times as I've gone to that church growing up as a kid, I ended up there were 4 services that unfortunately were really uncomfortable for me, but I had to be there. 2 of those were for my grandparents on my mom's side, who passed away within a year apart in 2013 and 2014. And then, I tragically lost one of my very good best friends, unfortunate circumstances, and I had to go to her memorial service as well. And then, obviously, being who the person was and how close we were and how much of an impact she had on everybody in that church and everybody that she met, I ended up having to go to that one. And it was so sad. It made you think about, the Queen of England. And I know it's really kind of hard to compare the pastor's wife to the Queen of England, but that's who she was. She was really a very impactful lady, a person that brought a lot of positivity. And that was somebody that we all really loved and cared for. And I'm really great friends with her kids. Her daughter was one of my good friends. We were in the same Sunday school class. We ended up going to the same college together. She's now married with a husband and has 3 beautiful kids. I also know her brother, and my brother is best friends with him. And it was really tough. And then, of course, I know the 3rd kid as well. So obviously, it's a real tragic situation, and I really felt bad for the entire family, and having to go there and just seeing them, and very appreciative that I was there, but I could tell their hearts were hurting, and I really, really felt bad for them. I know it's going to be something that is going to be with them for a while, but I do know that they're going to see her again. I mean, we're all going to see her again. I mean, I know there's people that probably listen to this that may not believe in God or believe in heaven, but I just have that confidence. That's just the way I feel. I feel that confident that we're going to see each other again eventually. So, it's a real tough situation. But again, I do love that family. I do miss her. She was a really good friend of mine. And Yeah, it's a real tragic situation. It's hard to kind of me to talk about it, and I'm actually, as of right now, I am wearing a wristband in honor of her. This is one of two wristbands I got with me, so it's just a real tragic situation. It's unfortunate, but I know we're all going to get through this, and yeah, it's going to be tough. So that, of course, was an unfortunate thing that happened, one of the things that happened. But now we need to start talking about some things that are going on in the sports world. And, well, actually, the memorial service was the day after the Super Bowl, and I ended up watching the game. And let's just say that my prediction was very incorrect. I was stunned by the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, I knew that they could beat the Chiefs if they played well, but I didn't think it was going to be the way it was. Like, you get up 24 to nothing on the Kansas City Chiefs. Nobody does that. Well, actually, the Texans did that once, but we saw how that ended up. But Philadelphia, they dominated that game. They dominated the Super Bowl. They got up 24 to nothing, and it was a real shock to see that kind of performance in the big game. Of course, Jalen Hurts wins the MVP, and he finally gets the Super Bowl representing H-Town. Kid who grew up in Channelview, which is one of the suburbs of Houston. So big congrats out to him. Of course, obviously very happy for him. And then, the rest of the Eagles, they just really dominated well. And then, I saw a stat that really was the telltale sign of the game of how it went. And that was that all season long, comparing Patrick Mahomes to C.J. Stroud, C.J. Stroud had faced a lot of opponent pressures, about 39.4% of the season, and yet he still managed to get the Texans a division title and a win in the playoffs and a trip to the divisional round where they ended up losing to Kansas City. But Patrick Mahomes faced 38.1% of average pressure in one game. So that kind of tells you what happened. Like what C.J. Stroud faced all season long, Mahomes faced in one game. And that's real shocking considering that Patrick Mahomes, you can argue, is the second greatest quarterback in NFL history. But that's where I think we need to talk about this. We need to kind of reevaluate this more. Now, I said that if Patrick Mahomes was going to win the Super Bowl, it would not put him as the greatest of all time. It would certainly mean that he would have done something Tom Brady had never done, and that's win 3 in a row. But it would not make him the GOAT because he probably would have needed another couple of Super Bowls to have that argument. But after watching the Super Bowl, after seeing what the Eagles did to Patrick Mahomes and looking at his resume in Super Bowls, I think it's safe to say that Patrick Mahomes is not the greatest quarterback of all time. And then again, you could say he might not be the second greatest quarterback of all time. Because let's compare Mahomes to some of the other great quarterbacks. Obviously, Tom Brady, 7-time Super Bowl champion, who, has been in 10 Super Bowls. So Tom Brady is 7-3. But when you look at those 3 losses, Tom Brady could have a case to where if there were 1 or 2 big plays in each of those games, Tom Brady is 10-0. Like 10-0. Tom Brady would be the greatest winner in the history of the National Football League. He would be the second greatest winner ever, or tied for second greatest winner ever, behind Bill Russell. So you're saying that Tom Brady, still the greatest of all time, not only in the wins, but also in the losses. He lost by 3 points to the Giants in 2007. He lost by 4 points to the Giants in 2007. He lost by 8 points to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017. I might have said 2007 twice. In 2011, the second one. But all those games, all three of those losses were one-score games, and it all came down to the wire. So Tom Brady, still the greatest quarterback of all time. I mean, you can better believe that if you're playing Tom Brady and you have the game, like if you're winning down the stretch, there's going to be a good chance he's going to find a way to win that game. Now, yeah, I mean, he'll find ways to win that game for sure. But let's look at Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes won 3 Super Bowls, but he also lost 2. However, when you look at the final scores of those 2 losses, you can tell that there's a big difference. In Super Bowl 55 against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, he lost 31-9. And then in the Super Bowl 59 to the Eagles, he loses 40-22. So Patrick Mahomes lost 2 Super Bowl games by more than a touchdown. And to be fair, even though the score was closer in Super Bowl 59, it really wasn't. I mean, it was Philadelphia. Like, you take away those 2 touchdowns, there's no question. The final score would have been 40-6, which would have been ridiculous. Now, how can you say that Patrick Mahomes is the second greatest quarterback when he's going to lose 2 Super Bowl games by blowouts? If those games were closer, if there were one-score games, then yeah, you can argue Mahomes is the second greatest quarterback of all time. But the fact that he lost to both times by blowouts, that is not a good look, especially for a quarterback that was trying to continue the Chiefs dynasty. And for the time being, though, there are some uncertainties with Kansas City, considering the fact that Travis Kelce might be considering retirement. And Kelce, obviously, who continued to have is in the spotlight for his relationship with Taylor Swift, who all season long has kind of been a distraction point for Kansas City. Not saying that it's bad for Travis Kelce, because, again, if she makes him happy and he makes her happy, then yeah, I'd support it. But the reality was that all season long, the Kansas City Chiefs had this narrative that they won all those games with help from the referees. Now, the referees clearly didn't show up when they needed to in the Super Bowl. I think the NFL didn't want that to happen. And, you know, there's some people out there, and I'm sure it was talked about in the media, that would say, well, this would have been a lose-lose situation for Philadelphia. If they win the game, it would be the refs didn't show up, and that the one time the refs weren't there, you know, the Chiefs won. But all season long, you know, what happened to the Chiefs and everything. Whereas if the Chiefs had won, well, the refs probably played a factor in all this and that. But, hey, Philadelphia was the better team. There's no question about that. They deserved to win. So, in retrospect, what you have here is a situation where the Kansas City Chiefs have lost their second Super Bowl in the 5 times that they've appeared since their run began in 2019. Kansas City is now a team that's on the market, the mark team. Because right now, going into next year, you were wondering, hey, can the Chiefs actually rebound from this? Can they recover? And if not, who's the team that's going to beat them in the AFC? Because, again, I said that even if the Chiefs lost the game, it's not a question about can the Chiefs get to the Super Bowl. It's a question of who can beat the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC. The Buffalo Bills had 4 chances, haven't been able to do that. They still might be that team, although there would be more pressure if the 2 teams make it to a playoff game. You have the Cincinnati Bengals, but Cincinnati's got some tough things ahead of them as far as their schedule, as far as the players on the team, with T. Higgins now being franchise tagged. That could be a situation to watch. The Baltimore Ravens, they're still a threat, but Lamar Jackson hasn't done well in the playoffs, and unfortunately there is a distraction on the team with Justin Tucker being in a similar situation as a certain quarterback who now plays for the Cleveland Browns. The Houston Texans might be the best chance, but they're going to have a lot of roster reorganization. So the question now is, who's the best team that could beat the Kansas City Chiefs and in the AFC. And that's going to be a question that I think a lot of people are going to want to know. Or if the Chiefs can be able to make it back to the playoffs. I think they'll still win the division next year, but, we'll just have to wait and see. The Chargers might be a threat in that division, and we saw what Denver did. They could be a threat. So as far as I'm concerned, the AFC West might be a little more competitive than most people think. But back to Patrick Mahomes, Mahomes is now 3-2 in Super Bowl played. Only 3 men have won more Super Bowls. 3 quarterbacks have won more Super Bowls. Tom Brady 7-3, but you can argue he could be 10-0 if it not for the 3 one-score losses. Joe Montana never once threw an interception in all 4 of his Super Bowl games, which he won all 4 times. And he's been involved in some blowouts, and he's been involved in some close victories in those times. Terry Bradshaw, 4-time Super Bowl champion. Now, you can make the argument that the Steelers were a great team during the 1970s, that he was just one part of that. But he did win 2 Super Bowl MVPs. He won, all those games were pretty close. 2 of those were one-score games against the Dallas Cowboys, whereas the other ones were 2-score victories over the Minnesota Vikings and the Los Angeles Rams. So Terry Bradshaw, you could make a case, is a better Super Bowl quarterback than Patrick Mahomes. But the way I see it right now, I think after what we saw, I'd still put Tom Brady number 1. I'd still say Joe Montana number 2. Patrick Mahomes, at best, number 3, with Peyton Manning slightly behind. So that's the way I look at it from the situation as far as the Super Bowl is concerned. I think Patrick Mahomes will go down as one of the greatest of all time. But unfortunately, that Super Bowl loss is something that he's going to have to live with. And if he loses the next Super Bowl by a blowout, we should not even consider putting him in the top 5 of greatest quarterbacks of all time. Patrick Mahomes could end up being the LeBron James. Whereas LeBron James has won 4 championships, Mahomes is he's had some tough losses. And the losses have been very bad. Because when you look at all the times he lost in NBA Finals, LeBron James was swept by the Spurs in 2007. He loses in 6 to Dallas, loses in 5 to the Spurs in 2014, loses in 6 to the Warriors in 2015, loses in 5 to the Warriors in 2017, swept by the Warriors in 2018. And then, that's pretty much all, she wrote as far as all of them final losses for LeBron James and company. So, yeah, you have to figure that Patrick Mahomes may be in the same category as LeBron James. But we'll just have to wait and see with regards to that. So LeBron James certainly, or Patrick Mahomes, certainly a quarterback that's going to be looked at. Same thing with the Chiefs. Is this the end of the run for Kansas City? Time will tell. We'll wait and see. Sticking in the NFL for the time being, breaking story that just happened. This was something that took place about a decade ago, and it involves former NFL lineman Richie Incognito, who, for those of you that don't remember, he got himself in some trouble when some text messages that he sent out, which were very derogatory and racially insensitive, by a former teammate, Jonathan Martin, were leaked out to the press, and that was what ultimately led him, Richie Incognito, to getting blackballed by the NFL to where, he's not playing in the league at this time. And, there's a lot of stuff that I can say about that. Like, Richie probably thinks, well, it's, it was just all locker room, joking, kind of fun in a way. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I understand, the camaraderie that you have with the teammates, and you can say some things which may or may not be very racially, may not be that accepting as a joking way, but you got to be careful. Like, there are some people in this world that are very sensitive to that stuff, in a sense. So the story at that time said that he was bullying Jonathan Martin. And Martin, I think, was, leading on to that, and in a sense, and was, letting everyone think, hey, I was bullied, by, Richie Incognito, this and that and all. And, everybody was really not too happy with Richie, and a lot of media members were very much this very much upsetting with it. And, well, recently, Jonathan Martin was interviewed for a podcast, and this is where he decides that he finally says, you know what? I did not feel like I was being bullied by Richie Incognito. And Martin decided to fess up, and he said, you know what? I've been trying to fix the narrative for the last 10 years and this and that, and I did not feel like I was being bullied in all this. Well, let's just say that when Richie Incognito heard about it, he was not too happy. He was very, very unhappy about that. Like, he went off on a tirade. He basically called out Martin, saying, you were not good in the NFL. You ruined my career over a lie and this and that. Then he goes off on the media members who tried to, who reported the story as Bullygate, and then defending their reporting, and even all these years later. And, there's a lot of things I can go into about all this and that, but the truth of the matter is that what we have here is somebody, after so many years, or at least a decade, finally decides to just fess up and tell the truth. And clearly, this is not a good look for Jonathan Martin here, because he tried real desperately to play the victim and say, I was bullied by Richie Incognito. And that's really what kind of rubs me the wrong way. Now, let me say this again. I'm not saying Richie Incognito is a saint. I'm not, accepting what he posted or what he sent on social media, even as a joking manner. I'm not saying that. Clearly, Incognito has a reputation in the NFL, which is clearly not acceptable, in a sense. But my thing is, why are you trying to make a false accusation? Why are you trying to stir up something against somebody that you really are having problems with, that you don't really like? And then you decide all these years later, like, you're basically putting this guy, you're ruining his career and his reputation. Why are you doing it now? And then all of a sudden you just decide, you know what, after all these years later, I'm just going to fess up and tell the truth. Why not tell the truth right then and there? And, this is where I have a problem with in society, because there are a lot of people that are unfortunately having all these false accusations, saying all this stuff. There's false sexual harassment claims. There's like false, violence stories and all this and that. And listen, I'm not saying, like, every claim, every accusation needs to be looked into, even if they are true. Everyone has to be looked into. But what bothers me is when all these people, like, when somebody makes a false accusation, hurts someone's reputation, and even after the accusation is proven to be false, the person that was accused still gets affected, whereas nothing is done to the people that make these accusations. Now, Jonathan Martin really is getting blasted, not only by Incognito, but also by some former teammates. And, former Miami Dolphins cornerback Nolan Carroll was quoted as saying, you go to war for those guys, and the fact that you're willing to basically burn an organization, burn a franchise because you couldn't stand up to what you needed to stand up to, that's what I don't have respect for. Like, Jonathan Martin should have addressed the problem right then and there. He should have gone up to Richie Incognito and say, hey, stop it. I don't take kindly to what you said. We can't have this together. We need to have this conversation right then and there. Now, and then he decides he doesn't do that. And for him to say, like to come up with all these stories with this, Bullygate stuff is what they're calling it now. Even if some of it is true or not, to have all that happen and then wait a decade until you finally decide to revise your career, like, or try to, make amends. What are you doing? Why wait all this time? Why not address it then and there? Why come out and say, look, I made a mistake. I was frustrated. I was angry. I didn't like the guy. I just wasn't happy with it, and I apologize for that. You might have hurt. You might have hurt your own reputation. You might have people that don't trust you or dislike you. Hell, you might have been cut from the Dolphins, and hell, you probably might not be playing in the NFL anymore. But hey, at least you were honest. You told the truth. You spared someone who may not be the most popular guy in the NFL from a worse situation, but yet you already got him in a worse situation. And this is why I struggle with all this. Like, we need to do something to people that make all these false allegations. Like, I'm not saying let's throw them in jail. I'm not saying let's, like, pound them or so. There's got to be a way that people that make false accusations, even if, like, just because they don't like someone, they can't stand the person because happens, they're trying to bring them down with the intention of bringing them down. We have to do something with all these false allegations. Now, unfortunately, you can't do that now because Jonathan Martin is not playing in the NFL, as is Incognito, and it's just a real tragic situation that, you know, unfortunately, that's one of the few bad scandals that the Miami Dolphins have gotten themselves into over the last, I don't know, last few years, the last decade. I mean, the poor Miami Dolphins, like, they're trying. Like, it's not the same franchise as with the Dolphins when Don Shula was coaching in the 70s, or when Dan Marino was there trying to lead his team to the Super Bowl. It's just not the same franchise. I mean, poor Dolphins. Dolphins are not the most scandalous animals out there, okay? But this really, to me, this stuff really bothers me. That somebody could come up with an accusation, even if there was, you know, even if the person they're accusing does not have a squeaky clean record himself. I mean, this is just the thing that really annoys me when we're talking about all this. So I really have no respect for Jonathan Martin. If he had just come out at that time and said, hey, I messed up, I told a lie and I apologize, his reputation could be ruined, but hey, at least he would have gotten out, been more understanding and maybe would have had some forgiveness. But it's going to take a long time for him to get forgiveness because of what he did. But then again, you could say, well, society back in those days isn't as sensitive as it is now. Like, if this were to happen today, like, I'm sorry, nobody would be playing in the NFL. I mean, Richie Incognito would not be playing in the NFL. If this were to get leaked out right now, he'd probably be banned from the NFL because of it. And, I mean, all I'm saying is that this should be a message and a warning to everybody that regardless of how close you are to your teammates, regardless of what you say in the locker room, and yeah, you could say what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room, but you have to be very respectful and caring for each other. Because unfortunately, we are in a situation where there's a lot of uncomfortableness in certain environments, not just in the locker rooms, but we're talking about offices, we're talking about public places. We're talking about situations where a lot of people, are being more aware, being more cautious about, not saying anything or doing anything that would offend a person. And that's where I think the Miami Dolphins should have done at that time. And I think the whole thing should have been, dealt with right then and there. But unfortunately, society was different back then, but now it's a little more strict, and we have to be very cautious of that. But more importantly, I feel like Jonathan Martin hurt himself even more by revealing after all this time that I lied, I told, and I hurt someone's career, and I didn't think he was bullying me. And that's just the thing that I don't really respect, in a sense. So it's a real unfortunate situation for both guys. And again, Incognito, not squeaky clean, but his reputation was ruined, and that's where I really think I lose a lot of respect for people that try to hurt someone's reputation over a false accusation. Same thing with the media too. Like the media really should have taken into consideration that this could have been a problem, but no, they just wanted to run with the story that they felt fit their narrative in a way. Doesn't necessarily mean that some of the stories that were reported out there are incorrect. Obviously, there were some that were incorrect, but some that were obviously correct and needed to be reported on. But ultimately, this whole thing is just lighting everybody up and thinking back to a time where it was really, really a bad situation for the Miami Dolphins. And yeah, it's just sad to see that franchise dealing with all that, especially having it rehashed or relived years later. So we'll see how all that transpires over the next uh, few days or so. Let's talk about the NBA right now. And let's get into the All-Star weekend, particularly with the slam dunk contest. Mac McClung, who is an NBA G League player who currently is with the Orlando Magic's organization, made NBA history as the first ever three-time slam dunk champion. Or actually, who won 3 consecutive slam dunk championships in a row. No one has ever done that. Michael Jordan didn't do it. Dominique Wilkins didn't do it. Vince Carter, I mean, he only won one time. I mean, you look at all the great players. Jason Richardson, who's won a couple of those, and Nate Robinson as well. But no one has ever won 3 slam dunk championships, let alone 3 in a row. And what Mac McClung did was just amazing and just tremendous. But at the same time, I feel like there's a massive problem with the NBA All-Star Weekend, and especially in the dunk contest. Because right now, we're seeing a dunk contest not being as exciting. And look, what Mac McClung did was just tremendous. I mean, he's a great dunker. And I've seen clips of him in high school putting out all these fantastic dunks. And it's just amazing. But my biggest concern is that Mac McClung is being viewed as sort of a prop, sort of the reason that the All-Star game needed to be exciting. Like, the only reason why people watch the All-Star games, I mean, yeah, you got that whole 14 format thing, which I didn't really pay too much attention to. I didn't really watch it. It just didn't seem to be great basketball at its best. Like, I want to see an All-Star game where you have the best players on the court competing against each other for pride, to represent the Western Conference or the Eastern Conference, and have some stakes involved as well. But clearly, that's not what's happening here. And I just think the All-Star Game weekend is just losing its luster. Like, people are watching the Super Bowl more often than they are watching the All-Star weekend. I mean, guys, there was a NHL, or not NHL, but a hockey game between Canada and the United States that literally has captured a lot of fans' interest, all because in the very first 9 seconds we had 3 fights between the hockey players representing their nations, and that was drawing a lot of interest. But, it's just sad with how far the NBA All-Star game has gone down. And the problem is the weekend festivities, there's nobody that's really stepping up that's of a superstar caliber kind of player. The problem, though, with the dunk contest in particular is not so much, well, it's a couple of things. Number one, the dunks are not as exciting. Now, let me say this. Mac McClung jumping over a car, literally jumping over the roof of a car, that was fantastic. Then you had him jumping over Evan Mobley, where he took the ball, touched the rim with it, and then was able to throw it down. That was impressive. That was an impressive dunk. Then, of course, you had him dunking 2 balls with the help of someone on I don't know if you call it a hoverboard or one of those spinning wheels, and then someone on the ladder. That was impressive. And then there was another dunk he did, which I can't quite describe it to you in the sense. Like, all those dunks were great, but my biggest thing is that there's a couple of issues. Number one, the dunks are not getting as interesting. People are using props now, and they're not, being as creative with their dunks. Like, I feel like the problem is the NBA has reached the limit of how far you can go with these dunks. Like, what's wrong with trying to do a 720? Like, where you spin around twice before you dunk. What's wrong with trying to flip upside, like, do a backflip when you dunk, or a front flip? Why not try to do a dunk where you have the help of a trampoline and you be a little creative? I mean, I know they did that in slam ball, and that was a remarkable sport, which I really think they need to bring slam ball back in a sense. But what's the point of having a slam dunk contest when there's really nothing that goes on? Mac McClung, yeah, 2 years ago, his dunks were fantastic. But I just feel like right now, when it comes to the dunk contest, it's Mac McClung and everyone else. Now, you can argue Mac McClung would be among the top 5 greatest slam dunk contestants of all time, alongside with Michael Jordan, Vince Carter, and Dominique Wilkins or Jason Richardson. Like, you have a mixture of stars, and then you have your superstars. That's funny. Like, wasn't it a long time ago when LeBron James boldly declared that he was going to compete in next year's slam dunk contest? And did he do it? No, he didn't do it. Like, this is where I struggle. This is why it makes me sad to even think about the fact that the slam dunk contest is not having its fair superstars compete. Like, I want to see if Victor Wembanyama, who is one of the rising stars of the NBA, can compete in the slam dunk. Have him, like a 7'4" guy, try to win a slam dunk contest. He could be the tallest slam dunk contestant champion ever. Like, Ralph Sampson competed in a slam dunk contest, and he was 7'4". So I feel like that's what you need to have. Then why not have another player, like maybe say, oh, I don't know, like, why not a guy like Cam Whitmore? Like, Cam Whitmore for the Rockets, I wish was a candidate for the NBA slam dunk contest for this year. I don't know if he would have won, especially when you have Mac McClung in there, but I really felt like he should have been competing in the slam dunk contest. And that's just the unfortunate nature of how things are. Because right now the problem is there are no stars in the slam dunk contest, and that is what I think is hurting the game. I feel like the NBA stars are not willing to step up and say, hey, I want to compete in the slam dunk contest. I want to put on a show for the fans. Like, fans go to all-star games to see the best of the best representing their teams, representing their leagues, to give everyone an opportunity to tune in to watch all the players put on these great highlights. And some players more than others will stand out, but the reality is this is supposed to be a star-studded event. And right now, the All-Star Slam Dunk Contest is not an all-star studded event. We're seeing a lot more amateur street ball dunkers putting on better performances than what the NBA All-Stars are. Now, why is that the case? Well, maybe it's just because they don't want to risk getting injured. Maybe it's because they're content with all the amount of money that they made or making the All-Star game. They don't want to participate. They don't want to waste their time. Come on now. You got to put on a show for the fans. Like, I mean, somebody has to step up and say, I want to compete. There needs to be future stars. There needs to be future dunks that can defy, that can extend to how far we've reached the limit. Like, we have gone past the days where the free throw line dunk was impressive. We have gone past the days where jumping, putting the ball between your legs or behind the back while you're making a dunk, that's impressive. We've gone past all that. And unfortunately, it's just a sad reality that we are living in. Because the NBA Slam Dunk Contest needs to be a star-studded event. And right now, it's just not. And that's just my thoughts on the whole matter. And yeah, definitely not intrigued by what's taking place as far as the NBA is concerned. So yeah, the All-Star Game does need to fix up their issues and their promises as well. Well, folks, this is going to be a little bit of a short podcast for this time. I actually have to make my way on a road trip. We are going to be heading up to San Antonio for a game or so, but I just wanted to throw in a podcast as well. So again, you guys can listen to it on Spotify, Podbean, and my YouTube channel at KWCLINE91. Hopefully, guys, the next one will be a little bit more informative and a little bit more intriguing. So until then, guys, hope you have yourselves a great weekend, and I'll see you next time in another episode of Crocking, Walking, and Dropping.